Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Today, I thought we might start off with a little story. Story goes back a few years to a gentleman getting on the train. And as he got on the train and settled in, getting ready to take a ride up into Pennsylvania, he reflected on where he was going and what he was going to do. And he thought, this is going to be a pretty auspicious occasion. Maybe I should make some profound remarks. And he thought, well, wait, I don't have anything to write on. Then he remembered that there was an envelope in his pocket, and he thought, well, I can write my remarks on the back of this envelope. And he pondered for a few minutes, and he began to write. 77 years ago, our forefathers brought forth upon this nation. And I think most of you know the rest of it. Now, the reason I'm leading with a little historical context today is because most of the things involved in our legislative program are more than just a little historical. Now, they don't all go back to the time that I walked with Moses in the desert, but other than that, they do go back a few years. Mainly, we're going to talk today about our legislative program. And I brought my lovely little blue sheet because I thought everyone would have one. You don't have one in your hand, but you do have one online. So you want to look at that as we go through. This is our foundational document as we go through. Mostly today, we're going to look at the four major points on this document. Those points being fully fund the medical trust fund, fully fund the annuity fund, and maintain the defined benefit program, and leave the structure of the board intact. So let's get started. The first point, promote full funding of the medical insurance fund. Once again, we need a little history, so let's go back. It's properly called shared responsibility. Those of us that are a little longer in the tooth than others remember that this was a law passed in 2010, and it was designed to shore up the medical trust fund. Originally, back in the 60s, the medical trust fund was set up and the state would contribute 0.75%. In addition to that, the state's working teachers would contribute an equal amount of 0.75. And this was established as a pay-as-you-go plan. So we had the medical trust fund up and running. Current teachers under 65 have an obligation under the shared responsibility plan to pay whatever the Medicare Part B equivalent is, which I think currently runs about $140, $150 a month. That's their obligation. The state, on the other hand, agreed that they would pay the health insurance costs for all retired teachers under 65. And that basically this would go through the state's umbrella plan that covers all the state employees and working teachers. All right, the current budget allocation for the state's 0.75% to the medical trust fund was fully funded. The state's obligation under the shared responsibility, which was to pay a flow-through amount for those teachers under 65, received zero allocation. Now, this is a problem because the state also directed TRS out of the medical trust fund to pay this amount, which was approximately $52 million. Pardon me. But it's more than $52 million. It's $52 million plus the lost interest on $52 million. And this would be a good time to note that last year, the 1 year for TRS, they averaged right at 30% on their investments. So we lost $52 million plus 30% interest on $32 million. So you can see. Now, there has been much made, particularly by legislators, about the fact that the fund is overfunded. Now, mathematically, overfunded is 101%. The program is currently 61% funded. So it's not overfunded, it's overachieving, and thus the legislature doesn't want it to overachieve apparently, so they've decided to cut into it. They need to be reminded that this program, up to this point, has saved the Commonwealth of Kentucky more than $5 billion in the 10, 11 years that it's been in existence. I dare say they have nothing else that's come anywhere close to that. All right, our second message is that the General Assembly properly fund their actuarial contribution to teachers' retirement. This is required by law. The solvency of the fund retirement system will improve as long as it's fully funded. Now, the TRS actuary has stated if you leave it alone, it is sustainable. Now, to the credit of the legislature, they did fulfill their obligation and fully fund that in the current budget. Kentucky must maintain the defined benefit system for current and future retirees. All right, the defined benefit system is not structurally deficient, as many would say. If you fund the system properly, there is no problem. The fund got to where its current situation is because of lack of funding right around 2006 up through 2016. Investment income funds approximately 70% of the retirement benefits paid out to retired teachers. Taxpayers are paying only approximately 1/4 of the benefit payouts. Each time the legislature fails to make a $1 contribution, TRS misses out on an additional $1 in investment income over the next 10 years. The board structure needs to be left alone. There's no need to change it. It's working, all right? The changing the board by filling with political appointees would be a disaster. All we have to do is look at the other retirement system. The KRTA system has a 17-member board, 11 of which are political appointees. Our system is currently funded at approximately 55% to 58%. Theirs is 15%. The Public Pension Oversight Board was established and made up of 8 members of the General Assembly and 6 appointed citizens. This board has the power to prompt any of Kentucky's retirement systems to disclose its activities and make recommendations to the General Assembly. Our message right now for this is extremely simple. Leave it alone. Now, we're going to talk about critical messaging tips. First of all, relatively simple. Don't let the opponents, frame the debate. Answer all attacks, but reframe it about what's important to us, our legislative priorities. Be polite, civil, and focused on the priorities. This is not a who can out-bully who by being louder and more boisterous. We've got to get past yelling and screaming at each other and get to the point where we talk about the facts, the real facts, not the somebody said facts. One thing I want to ask is that you do not let any question or point brought up during a discussion go unanswered. It's our responsibility to find the answer to that and get it to those who raise the question. Sometimes it may not be favorable to our point of view. That's not the way you work. You get them the real answer. If you can't trust us, we don't have much else left to offer. We're going to talk about the candidates next. When you involve people, you have to involve other people. They may not agree with you. That's not the point. The point is everyone needs to be involved. The current filing deadline is January the 7th, 2022. This will affect all members of the Kentucky House, half of the members of the Kentucky Senate, all of the members of the U.S. House of Representatives, and one U.S. Senate seat. Now, many of you will recall that in the past, the filing deadline was usually the last Tuesday in January. And the legislature, properly so, said that they were wasting too much time of everybody sitting around and not really taking a stand on anything because they didn't know whether or not they were going to have an opponent in the primary or the general election, and so we just kind of sat around. So they said, okay, move it to the front of the session, get that out of the way. It is rumored, however, that it's probably going to be moved back to the end of January. Now, there's actually a reason for that. All the seats in the Kentucky legislature, seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, their districts were established as a result of the 2010 census. We've now had the 2020 census. There is a need to redraw all of these legislative boundaries. Now, most of you, if you've spent any time looking at the census data, realize there's been a significant move, if you will, in folks in Kentucky. They moved from the far west, they've moved from the far east, and generally we're gravitating toward the middle. But these seats still have to be, new seats and boundary lines have to be established. So it will be up to the legislature to do that. And this is important because how are you going to file to run for a seat if you don't even know whether or not you live in that district? So this is going to be an ongoing situation that we need to watch closely. There is a rumor that there might be a special session before the actual session to redraw those lines. So once again, we're going to have to wait and see. Your responsibility as a KRTA member is to find out who has announced to run in your district. Get to know those people, get to know where do they stand on issues. Now, our problem is not whether a person is a Republican or a Democrat. Our problem is whether or not they have any backbone. If they're not willing to stand up to the leadership in either house, if they're not willing to get out and find real answers to questions, they're really not much benefit, and they certainly are probably not going to represent your point of view. If they seek answers, we will help them. As I stated earlier, it's not always going to be to our benefit to properly answer a question, but we're going to properly answer the question anytime given the chance. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, if you have a good friend who thinks it's time to become involved, encourage them to run. We always need friends in the legislature. And I will say that we have friends, both R's and D's. So party is not the issue we need to be concerned with. We need to have people who have as one of the law firms that advertises on TV all the time, we need people with Kentucky courage. Now, stay connected to KRTA. And there's information on the screen for you to do that. We expect to be in the annex in 2022. We expect to be there to look legislators in the face. We expect that they will respond as they did in the past when we were able to do that. You know, they've spent a year hiding behind the pandemic, even though they badmouth the pandemic. We want to be there. This information on this slide will allow us to contact you and have you come with us. Most of you remember 2 or 3 years, however many years ago it's been now, we packed the annex for committee meetings. We may do that, we may need to do that again if they start working against us on legislation. The last slide is teach Frankfort to pay their debts, and that's exactly what we want. The use of TRS Medical Trust Fund money to pay the state's obligation for the medical care, that's all they're doing is borrowing money. It's the same way they got themselves in trouble with the annuity. Folks need to get out, get involved, and make sure that the people that you vote for have the courage to stand up for us. Thank you.